name is Blerim. I'm the COO at Icinga, and my main responsibility is to oversee the day-to-day operations of the company. And looking back, when I was in school, I had this ultimate goal of becoming a systems administrator. That was like my goal. I want to achieve that. And eventually, I did that. By practicing, I was obsessed with computers, of course, particularly with Linux. And I eventually became a systems administrator. Doing that for a couple of years, at some point, I figured out it was not fulfilling anymore. So I switched my job, staying in the same company. I started doing integrations for Icinga, building Puppet modules with Leonard, creating integrations for Logstash, for Elastic, and some other things. After that, I moved to partner management, connecting globally companies with the Icinga company, and I really enjoyed that as well. Afterwards, I moved into product management, and that's kind of the point where asking questions really became a hobby of me. So during our meetings, most of the time, you will hear me asking things. The reason why I'm talking about my school time or goals and questions particularly is because this kind of motivated me to do this talk, to share with you and make sure everyone leaves today knowing what our goals are and also giving you the opportunity to question it, to participate in the development, maybe today, but maybe also even later. And when we started creating the agenda for this Icinga Camp, at some point we decided that we were going to share insights into the development stage of things that we just had started developing. And this is pretty uncommon for us, to be honest. We usually take some time until we publish things or until we talk about things. So this got me really excited. And I thought, okay, I'm convinced the audience will like it and maybe even expect it. So that's what we did. At Icinga, our primary goal in the end is building a tool that enables our users to universally monitor everything that they have in their IT infrastructure. And this kind of sounds pretty simple at first, because if we look at the impressive plugin collection from the Linux Fabric and many other plugins as well out there, it becomes very clear it is universal monitoring in some way. However, if we look at how engineers manage and operate their IT infrastructure today, it becomes clear that for some technologies, it's not that simple like running a plugin. We've seen that in the last talk from Eric, where he explained to us those many, many things that are required to monitor a Kubernetes environment. So, why are plugins sometimes not sufficient? Let's have a look at some examples that already exist today in the Icinga ecosystem. If we look at the VMware Monitoring module from Icinga, we can clearly see that it has a differentiation to Icinga 2 because it visualizes things as what they are, and users, administrators, engineers can clearly see what is happening. It connects in a way to the VMware or ESXi cluster that was natively built by that vendor and leverages the SDKs provided by the vendor. It provides sufficient information to manage a whole vSphere cluster and connects it tightly to Icinga 2 to add monitoring on top of it. If we look at the certificate monitoring module, it's pretty similar. A certificate is not always tightly connected to a host or a server. A certificate is used in many different ways, and it has different information compared to hosts and services. It has a fingerprint, it has a creation date, an expiry date, and many, many more information that has nothing to do with a host or a service at all. Again, the certificate monitoring module provides a clear visualization of the things as what they are. And again, it tightly integrates it into the monitoring. My last example is the business process modeling. different from the other two examples. It does not collect data somewhere. It just uses data that we already have in our Icinga clusters. It uses the data coming from the host and the services, but it puts them into a different angle and gives us the possibility to visualize a business process that exists as a summary of logically connected hosts and services. It's, again, a dedicated visualization of something that we want to represent and make sense out of that data and not just provide it as what it is. Now, of course, you could say that this can already be done without those modules, because what you could do is you could use the plugins and monitor the certificates. There are plugins for VMware out there as well. They are working quite well. You could create dummy hosts and dummy services, give them meaningful names, and then they are what you want them to be in the end. However, it's not intuitive. It becomes very blurry at some point and does not allow you to understand anymore what is what, because everything is kind of the same, and the only differentiation is the name of something. This can work for so many things, but for some technologies, it just doesn't work anymore. Our ambition with Icinga in the end is that what we provide as a monitoring company, the user should understand what it is. Clarity is crucial when doing monitoring. With Icinga, we don't want to build the next data store for something, and you have to deal with the data and do whatever you want with it. We want to take that away from our users and make sense out of that data before we represent it to the users and before we send notifications, alerts, or whatever to it. Because, in the end, only because it pretends to be a duck, probably it's not a duck. Now, if we look at the current architecture, we can already see where this is leading. We have on the left side the all-rounder. This is like Icinga 2, with lots of plugins, features, and so on. Can be used for many different things. But additionally to that, we provide modules that are specialized for certain technologies and provide valuable information to especially those technologies. The modules basically broaden the horizon of Icinga. And at the same time, the all-rounder, Icinga 2, stays there to fetch everything that cannot be covered otherwise. While the other modules that we already have broaden the horizon of Icinga, of course, Kubernetes in the next steps will teach Icinga tricks that we haven't seen before. It's pretty impressive if we look at the presentation from Eric, what is necessary, what has to be done to actually provide meaningful visualizations and meaningful data to the users so they can actually work with that in their day-to-day business and monitor a Kubernetes cluster effectively. So, using this architecture, we stay strong in our belief that our focus relies on extensibility. There is no infrastructure similar to another. So with Icinga, traditionally, we always give the users the possibility to pick whatever they need. So the user has the choice to build its tailored monitoring system by choosing the modules that they need, enabling the features, installing the plugins, or creating something on their own. There are plenty of things out there, plugins, modules, features, themes that you can use, branding for your own company, and so on and so on. So the goal is that if you use Icinga, it is a monitoring tool that was tightly tailored to your infrastructure because you can enable and disable whatever you need in your environment. That brings me to the next question, because you could say, okay, if we extend Icinga with modules, what do they even have in common with each other? In the end, I could use them decoupled from each other and just use the vSphere module without even using Icinga 2. And that is true, and that's also intended, but still it's a false conclusion to think that there is no commonality. Because with every module that we build, we rely on our own libraries that we extend with every new module, and every new feature that we add to our modules and code, parts of it go to the library. So adding new functions to one module may result in new functions in another module as well. So we have the commonality of shared libraries in our PHP library for the web interface. Also, the Icinga web framework brings all those modules together so they can share visuals and libraries and code and provide this lightning fast experience all the way around, independently from what module you use or not. In the end, even for the collectors, finally we may have shared libraries as well, because it makes sense. Even though we can use APIs from the vendors with our collectors directly without having to work around it, there are some shared mechanisms as well there. But since we just started that journey, again, I'm talking about goals, so we will see where this leads us. Another very important commonality when looking at modules and Icinga 2 in combination is the mechanism of recognizing incidents. And this brings me to the talk from earlier today, or from the morning, by Julian and Johannes, where we intend to create shared workflows for all of those modules in order to keep the administrators and engineers updated about their incidents, about their informations, and whatever they need without having to look at the interface. Why is that so important? If we look at the current workflow, it looks like this. We have this Icinga 2, and let's take, for example, a Kubernetes module that may be released at some day. If we would use the current architecture that we have as of today, we would need a check command on the Icinga 2 side that fetches information from the Kubernetes module, then creates a notification out of it and sends it to the user. Now, this same workflow for all of different modules does not scale at some point. And incidents and notifications, in the end, are the part where everything should flow in together. And it needs to represent a central piece of software where the modules have the same workflow in order to keep engineers up to date with whatever is going on in their IT infrastructure. Giving notifications, so with the notifications module, we are giving notifications the focus it deserves in a modern IT infrastructure. It's a standardized way to manage incidents, manage contacts, groups, and so on. It's a transparent way for Icinga administrators to see globally what is going on, but also for other Icinga users, giving them a chance to see and receive alerts about what they are interested in by deciding on their own. This is basically where Icinga is slowly heading to by providing more and more modules, centralizing everything in the web interface, and also on the notifications level. Now, with this architecture, we are pretty close to achieve what we see right here. But if we look even further and expand that idea to the broadened future, it could even look like this. Don't take it for granted. It's more like the idea behind what we are aiming to do with a notifications module and with modules specialized for technologies. Bringing the focus into the web interface and leaving the workload to the connectors, and at the same time centralize incidents into the notifications module, and additionally provide different ways to receive those information from Icinga. It does not really matter if you're using PagerDuty or if you're using MS Teams or ServiceNow or emails. With this similar architecture, we will be able to correlate even data from different modules and make sense out of it. because that's where we are heading with Icinga, not being the next data store, but making sense out of data and providing meaningful information to the users. And this brings me back to the first slide. Universal monitoring, that sounds so simple, in the end is not simple anymore, of course. What we wanted to do today is to demonstrate that we are in the middle of executing the idea of having this kind of architecture in the future. And of course, it's a long way to go, and there are different challenges in the way as well. There are many things that I didn't even mention. There are things like high availability for modules, shared libraries for modules in a different way, and also default way for visualizing graphs and charts and storing metrics. This will be another part for the foundation, but the idea remains as what we've seen it. And now that I talked so much about goals, I would be happy to hear your questions.
Any questions?
Hi, Blerim. Very interesting approach, because when I saw your slide with all the different sources, it reminded me a bit of the things that were made with the import sources in Director. So are you maybe that you move import sources from Director to the new approach and remove them there, or what is
Sorry,
the idea?
can you repeat?
Do you plan to remove these import sources?
No.
And move them to the new approach?
No.
Or maybe provide two ways to work with them?
So no plans to remove anything right now. It's more like about providing more than what we have now. Of course, there is an import source for vSphere, and at some point we may have to ask ourselves if we actually need it, because at some point the vSphere module will be able to do the notifications through Icinga notifications on its own. So by removing the dependency to Icinga 2 for notifications, we will have to ask ourselves if we need that connection to Director, yes.
So let's try again. Can you go to the previous slide, please? One more time. So isn't this how people are using the system already?
Sorry?
So this thing here, like you have AWS, for example, and Google Drive, and isn't that what people are doing already with their custom integrations, like in-house things?
With the custom, I don't get it, sorry. With the custom integrations?
So, okay, we have some stuff that pulls Amazon, and then we check if the host is up or not, and then we send messages to Slack. Both of those are things we've done in-house.
Okay.
And so I'm asking, isn't that how people are using it already, like the whole system?
No, because you kind of have to compare it with what we are currently doing with vSphere, where we provide dedicated views and dashboards in order to clearly visualize a cluster like a cluster, and a pod like a pod, a deployment like what it is. So by visualizing those things in the first step, we make it easier for engineers to actually recognize what is going on, besides of the regular lists of plugins what we have right now.
I think you misunderstood each other probably.
Perhaps. Maybe you can.
I don't know. What you are saying is that people already do this. And that's perhaps true because you can monitor all this right now, perhaps using a plugin or all that stuff. But still right now, you have to, at the end, you have to squeeze everything into a host or a service to get then an alert afterwards. And that's the different thing is like bringing the data into perspective, like with the Kubernetes module, that you see the data store, and Kubernetes does not fit into a host service principle because it has other resource types and it has pods and blah, 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 blah. And nobody knows how much blah, blah, blahs there are. And I think the main difference is that we get a Kubernetes perspective and get an OpenStack perspective where you have other components like Neutron or Cinder or all that stuff. And at the end, like Notification Manager brings them together. And right now you have to squeeze in everything into like the host service object. And that's the difference. You can monitor all this right now, but at the end the story could be having an individual model for all that stuff and having a reflection of how Google sees themselves and Azure sees themselves and OpenStack looks like. In another perspective ends up using the thing. You can monitor all that now, but different.
I hope I understand it right. Because actually we monitor vSphere and we have to generate Icinga objects, hosts and services individual for each module. And you will create directly objects for Icinga to monitor with properties?
No. We kind of remove the dependency to Icinga 2 completely. Because in the end, the module has the knowledge about the state of something anyways. So there is basically no need in additionally creating those objects because we can directly use the information from the module.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, how long will this journey, how long will be the journey until we reach this picture?
Years?
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
That's the most honest answer, because it's not like a plan that we can achieve tomorrow. That would be a little bit too easy and too obvious. This is more like the general approach of where we expect Icinga to move to.
Any more? Oh, yes. Now I forgot. Oh, it's like getting old.
Thanks. So the far away goal would be then to shift Icinga from monitoring hosts and service objects to the modules having basically or being their own monitoring and notification.
At the same time, while remaining with the hosts and services where they work pretty well.
Okay,
so of course,
not dismissing them completely.
Yeah. So of course, the necessity for hosts and services remains. There's no point in removing that. But in the end, for some platforms and for some technologies, it just makes sense to create something dedicated to that. Like for Kubernetes, like for vSphere, which we already have, and maybe also for others. And again, this is like more like an example here with AWS and so on, but this is kind of the direction where it leads to, because for some technologies, it's just not sufficient to have those hosts and services. But where it's sufficient, of course, it remains because it works very well.
Thanks.
More questions? We still have time. Don't be shy. Take the chance.
Thank you. One question to the module integration. Who sends the notification in the end? Will it be from the module to the Icinga core and he sends out the notification? Or
no. So it's not the core that sends out the notification. It's the thing that we saw today in the morning. Icinga notifications, or whatever it's called. It will receive the events from all modules and provide event rules in order to let the user decide what they want to receive, at what time, to what person, through which channel.
As a certain module?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Was it you?
Maybe this is a stupid question because I don't understand.
There are no stupid questions, only stupid answers.
Excellent. If I interpret this right, then what now is Icinga, the Icinga core, becomes kind of like a module for hosts and services?
No. Well, yeah, sorry, I didn't let you finish the sentence. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Which stands parallel to Kubernetes and AWS and whatnot. So, will there still be a core? And what does it do?
Good question, actually.
Thank you.
So there will be an Icinga 2, of course. But yes, as you say, it kind of moves out of the center, but not because we shrink it, but because we add other collectors in parallel to it. But yeah, the question could be, should it then be called core? Well, probably not.
So in the end, there will no DSL anymore, but Icinga Director, for example, for configuration hosts and services, besides all the other modules?
No DSL?
The domain-specific language for configuration, yeah.
Maybe I don't understand. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, will there still be a DSL?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay. So the core remains untouched. We may move functionality like the notifications into something dedicated, but the core with the checker and the whole thing remains. Yeah.
Will this new thing be called Icinga 3, or do you plan to stick to the 2 in your name so that you have Icinga 2 version 2 dot something?
So I personally would love to get rid of the 2 because it's in the way when versionizing. However, it's not so easy in terms of packaging and so on. Probably there are ways around it. Honestly, we didn't have the balls yet to remove it. But no, it will not be called Icinga 3. It's more like a slow transition and evolution. It's not like a revolution.
I think a 2 evolution. NG.
We earned a very old tool from...
Can you hold the microphone? Yep.
We earned a very old tool from Icinga 1, the notification manager. And we ported to the Icinga 2. The question is, there will be a real notification manager 2 also? Then
I don't know yet. It depends on if it's doable, if it makes sense, honestly. When we moved from IDO to Icinga DB, for example, we figured out we actually can do it in a way that it works and that it makes sense for the users. Of course, there are users where it doesn't make sense because there's just too much data, for example. It would take weeks to synchronize it, so the user has to decide if it makes sense. But with the transition from IDO to Icinga DB, technically it was possible to translate the data. Now with the notifications, I would say it depends on the final version of it and how the configuration will look like. And depending on that, we can evaluate if it's doable in a useful way. And if it's doable in a useful way, we probably will have a migration toolie. But still, if the configuration differs so much from the old one, at some point it just can't be done programmatically. Like with the transition from the configuration of Icinga 1 to Icinga 2. We also had attempts back then to translate Icinga 1 configuration to Icinga 2 configuration. but at some point figured out it just doesn't make sense, because if you would do that, you wouldn't even use the features of Icinga 2. And that could happen with the notifications as well, that maybe it could be technically be possible, but just don't make sense because it works differently and has other features. So it depends on what the final configuration will look like.
Probably it will be better to demolish the old and notification manager and build it up from scratch.
I didn't get the one to do what with the old one?
With the old notification manager. It's very, very different. It's based on MySQL and.
Oh, you mean the very first?
Yes.
Okay. And you mean migrating data from that to the new one?
To the new one.
Same answer. Same answer. We would have to look into the data on both sides and see if it can be migrated. If it can be done, and if sufficient amount of users has that, and I'm not sure how many users use it actually, because it never was really, really published in a really, really final release.
Okay. Thanks.
Do you plan to keep paywalling RHEL 9 and 8 packages?
Yes.
Sad.
I'm sorry.
But you know there's a Freedom for Icinga website where they offer free packages? Okay.
Yes, and that's totally fine because, of course, everyone should be allowed to, and we provide everything for everyone to build packages. But at the same time, it's a huge effort to actually build and provide those things. So at some point, we kind of try to differentiate between the regular user and the company that is using Icinga for commercial reasons, and I believe that separating them by these operating systems, it's a fair approach.
Yeah, my question is.
Sorry.
With this new approach, I get the feeling that my next Galera cluster outage will rob me of all notifications. So maybe
your next Galera cluster will do.
Yeah, if next time the Galera cluster goes down, I will get no notifications anymore.
Nah, that shouldn't be the case.
So
that shouldn't
all
happen.
this, vSphere DB, if the DB goes down, no Icinga CLI check.
Yeah, but at least you should receive the notification that the notifications is down.
Well,
at least like
at
that.
the moment,
but of course,
yes.
if we have configuration in the database, we need the configuration. Yeah, clear. Yeah. But I mean, since development has just started yet, and this is a concern, of course, there are valid ways that we need to evaluate how we can provide fallbacks. Like, do we preload the config and then work even without the database and load it after time or whatever, or if we have a fallback email address to provide valuable information. So no final answer how it will be solved, but it's a concern, a valid one.
Well, my internal strategy would be to keep the old notification system to notify me myself about the state of the Icinga components, and also notify the Galera admins that the Galera database went down.
Well, it's kind of the same problem. If your Icinga 2 goes down, you won't receive the notifications either.
Well, I have the SMS eagles that notify me then.
Yeah, but who sends the notification to the SMS eagle?
They pull.
Yeah, and that's the point. Like you just move it away to a different one, and of course you could have an external satellite hosted in the cloud that monitors the monitor. It's a problem on its own, where I'm not sure if it can be solved finally at all, because yeah, who monitors the monitor? Probably the best idea would be to monitor from a separate source somewhere else.
Yeah, and,
even without the new notifications, even with what we have today. Because if it's not your database, your Icinga 2 can crash, or the SMS Eagle, or whatever. It's basically just how many layers you put in between to make really, really sure that you get notified.
And what I'm missing in this universal monitoring theme is connectors to other monitoring systems.
I didn't get that, sorry.
Well, we got a new software, and the project required that they monitor themselves, which is, in my view, bad. And the logical conclusion that results from that is that I now have to write myself a connector to that other monitoring system so that I get those hosts and services somehow mapped into Icinga so that I can put the or model the application, this business process in the business process module. And also I have a second separate Icinga for one module that's a little bit, let me say, looks bad, so I didn't really trust it. But in the end it works fine, but I didn't want to have it in my main Icinga. So I connected two Icingas to get the results of that module inside my main Icinga. So in the end I need to have all the data in one Icinga so that I can model it in the business process module.
It will be in one Icinga.
Exactly.
It's just a different view where it will not be the core that has all the data.
But yeah, so I need to connect the stuff. And I don't see any connectors there. I see connectors to platforms, to Kubernetes, to but I don't see connectors to external monitoring systems or other Icingas.
It's up there. I mean, what I put there is things that are relevant for alerts, but moving the data to something different, you can just replace PagerDuty with a webhook, for example, with whatever.
I know that.
And you can replace the Kubernetes module with a generic API that you can feed on your own as well. Not required, of course, but optionally.
Yeah, but maybe it could be part of a module to make it easy to connect two Icingas.
I don't get it, I'm sorry.
Well, you have connectors between Icinga and other systems like vSphere-DB or Kubernetes.
Yeah.
But you don't have a connector that connects two Icingas. There's no module for that.
Of course there is a module. Actually, there is a module. It's called Monitoring with IDO, and it's called Icinga DB Web with Icinga DB. It's also, like today, it's a module.
But can I connect two masters that don't know of each other?
No. Yes, you can. Not yet. But it's technically implemented in Icinga DB. We store the environment additionally to the data with the idea to provide exactly that. So what you could do today, you could store the data of multiple masters into one database, into one Icinga DB. They will be separated by an environment ID.
And what's with PRTG and WhatsApp Gold? Can I connect to those?
No.
Yeah.
Not right now.
That's what I need to write myself right now.
Okay, yeah, right now, yes, of course, yeah.
Again, I can still highly recommend subscribe to the newsletter, because then at least you get one notification per month from Katja. So subscribe to the newsletter. Please. Thanks, Katja. I would say last question, if that's kind of okay. I think there's just one hand left.
So if you said this during your presentation, so I'm sorry, I didn't get it. But what will be the benefit of this solution, of this approach?
So the major benefit is, first of all, that we can actually add meaning to the data that we collect, where it's necessary. That's important. For example, let's take Kubernetes because it's so super complex. Doing that with hosts and services, there's no good chance that you could do it in a way that everyone in the team and you yourself would understand what is going on if you use plugins. With Kubernetes, on a larger scale, with more than 2 pods, most likely not. It starts with a polling mechanism. That's too slow, even if you set it to a minute or to 10 seconds. That's just too slow. Another part is the visualization. Of course, you can, as mentioned, you can name them to whatever you want them to be, but it's still a host in the end. And you can create dependencies, and you can work your way around it, but doing it the right way is to visualize it as what it is, to give the dependencies as what they are, and provide the information in a way that is relevant for that technology, where it does not work with plugins. And there are many things where plugins are perfectly fine, of course, and this will not change. However, for some advanced platforms, this way it just makes more sense for users to make more sense out of the data that is being collected.
Thank you very much, Blerim, for the talk. Thank you.